Advanced Heroquest, The Raid on the Torre Di Morte, Part 2. As the sun set on the city of Tobaro, the clash of blades and the cries of the dying too began to fade away. It was always the same. At dusk, the three factions who were fighting for control of the city would cease their hostilities and consolidate their newly attained positions. This lull in the bloodletting was also the time that many everyday folk braved the streets. The three individuals intent on breaking into the tower of the Necromancer, Maria Morte, were no exception. The Necromancer Valdôtain and his two undead hounds met the knight Heinrich Lowen and the sellsword Murdoch Voltman at the Siren Song Tavern, and led them through some of the lesser known back alleys of the city to the tower of his rival, known as the Torre Di Morte. The party readied their weapons as Valdôtain employed his magics to rot the large entrance doors so they could be easily kicked open. The raid on the Torre Di Morte had begun. The party consisted of the Necromancer Valdôtain, the ever-living, and his two hounds, Dwarge and Sefer. He had hoodwinked the hero Heinrich Lowen and his drinking partner, the buccaneer Murdoch Voltman, into joining him on his nefarious quest to break into the tower of his rival and ostensibly free his friend Wendell. However, the truth be told, he had an altogether different reason for wishing to ascend the tower. The ensorcelled ingress to the Necromancer's tower began to visibly age and decay before the party's eyes. Heinrich quickly moved to the fore, ready to kick it down, as Voltman checked the tuning on his handgun one last time. Beside them, the two reanimated hounds growled, the sound rattling in their exposed rib cages. Behind stood Valdôtain. He twitched involuntarily and kept casting his eyes up to the moon, as if time was against them. As soon as the wood of the door had become brittle, Heinrich bounded up the steps and kicked the door in, Valdôtain's two beasts keeping abreast with the knight. Inside was dark and musty, and Heinrich found himself in a narrow corridor that bore left and ended in a right turn. The two undead dogs brushed past the knight to take the lead, followed by Voltman and Valdôtain, as Heinrich unsuccessfully checked the inner wall for any secret doors. The corridor ended in a dead end with a single door on the inner wall. Once more, Heinrich took the lead, with Voltman following behind, his gun cocked and ready, as the two hounds growled and pawed at the flagstones beneath their feet. The door opened up into a long room containing a pair of tables, an ancient bronze statue, and a treasure chest. The party was greeted by a grave guard in a suit of mottled chaos armour and 4 skeleton warriors. Heinrich immediately slashed at the formidable leader of the group and managed to inflict a single wound. Voltman then aimed his weapon over his comrade's shoulder and neatly blew the grave guard's head off his shoulders. The remaining undead then moved forwards. The lead skeleton thrust his sword towards Heinrich, but found it deftly turns aside. Valdôtain then bade the two heroes make way. Voltman took the opportunity to reload, whilst Heinrich and the two hounds moved away from the doorway. The magic wielder positioned himself across from the door before pulling out a sachet of fire dust and hurling it through the ingress. skeletons to smithereens and inflicted a single wound on one skeleton and 2 wounds on the other. In response, the 2 undead piled forwards into their assailant, assuming he would be an easy kill, but the nearest saw his blows deflected with ease by Valdôtain's staff. The first undead then found himself on the pointy end of Heinrich Lowen's sword, and put to rest, before the knight moved up to face the last warrior from beyond the grave. The last skeleton hacked wildly at Heinrich, but fumbled, and the knight took great joy in cutting his opponent down. The 2 heroes then wasted no time in searching the room for plunder. Heinrich raced to the treasure chest on the far side of the room and found 150 gold coins upon opening it. Volkmann's investigation of the old bronze statue, however, yielded nothing. Valdôtain, meanwhile, wasted no time in making for the door on the far side of the room and, upon opening it, found it led to another corridor with a single left turn at its end. Before leaving the room, the 2 heroes searched both the 2 tables and then, unsuccessfully, the room itself for treasure. Volkmann found nothing of use on his dust-laden table, and Heinrich's clumsy fumbling gifted the games master a dungeon counter. With this, the 2 joined Valdôtain at the staircase he had discovered. The party ascended the stairs up to the first floor and reached a landing that bore to the right. The windows to the outside were thick with dirt. Moth-eaten tapestries hung on the inner wall, an almost imperceptible breeze making them shimmer. The 2 hounds moved to the end of the corridor, followed by Volkmann. Heinrich hung back slightly to investigate the old wall hangings. As on the ground floor, the main corridor led to a dead end that contained a single door. Heinrich, meanwhile, found an old door secreted behind one of the tapestries. At the end of each exploration phase, the games master rolls a die. If a 12 or a 1 comes up, they get to randomly take a dungeon counter. At this juncture, the games master got an ambush counter. The party split into 2, with Valdôtain and his 2 hounds going to the door at the end of the corridor, whilst the 2 heroes took the hidden door. The party opened both doors simultaneously. They led to a long room that contained another bronze statue, a table, and another treasure chest. However, it also contained 4 skeleton warriors and a grave guard champion. Heinrich wasted no time in bisecting the nearest skeleton from head to hip. Volkmann, following the knight's lead, blew the skull off the skeleton behind. At the other door, Valdôtain deftly bypassed the defensive sword strokes of the grave guard and inflicted a single wound with his staff. In response, the grave guard raised his axe and swiped at the necromancer, but failed to strike the old man. At the hero's door, the surviving skeleton swung his blade at Heinrich, but it too failed to land true. Valdôtain once more backed away from his foes and drew out his second sachet of fire dust, hurling at the grave guard who had dared strike him. It inflicted 2 wounds on the skeleton, leaving him barely clinging to undeath, and outright killed the other skeleton warrior behind. The grave guard then grabbed the talisman of escape that hung at his waist and crushed it in his gloved fist. This caused him to also vanish into thin air. Heinrich then joined in the cull and cut down the last of the undead. Valdôtain and his 2 undead hounds moved to the door on the opposite side of the room, whilst Heinrich blazed a path to the adjacent treasure chest, finding once more 150 gold crowns. Volkman moved to investigate the nearby statue, but to no avail. It was unremarkable. Searches of the tables and the room also failed to yield anything of worth. Valdôtain opened the door in front of him to reveal a corridor leading to another staircase up, and the party soon moved to ascend to the uppermost floor. But not before the GM was able to gain yet another dungeon counter. The party reached the top landing and found themselves on a short corridor that ended in a right turn. The whole group moved around the corner, but found themselves faced with a large, rotting, undead ogre who bellowed a gurgling roar. Suddenly, they heard a clack, clack, clack of skeletal feet mounting the staircase behind them. One pair belonged to a skeleton warrior, and the other to the singed graveguard that had escaped from Valdôtain's clutches on the first floor. The undead hound, Dwarge, lolloped forwards to ravage the undead ogre ahead of them, inflicting a single wound. Sefer, his brother, then did the same and, likewise, caused another single wound. Heinrich, his sword and shield raised, roared as he charged the two undead that had followed them up the stairs, and immediately cut down the graveguard before kicking his corpse down the stairs and rounding on the remaining skeleton warrior. Valdôtain also joined the fighting by employing his magics on the undead construct to flay the flesh on the monstrosity, reducing both its wounds and strength by 1, with an ongoing spell that would continue to wither the creature away turn by turn. However, before that could occur, Volkman stepped forward, aimed his handgun at the ogre, and pulled the trigger. The shot almost went awry, but the buccaneer wisely used a fate point to re-roll the shot, and it squarely hit its target, taking off the last of the ogre's wounds and causing it to crumple to the ground, a mere mass of rotten flesh and brittle bones. In the undead's turn, the lone surviving skeleton swung his blade at Heinrich, but fumbled, gifting the knight a free attack, which he used to hack the skull off the pathetic revenant. With the undead eliminated from the corridor, Valdôtain called out to his allies. It was time to make his play.
My friends, help me with this door. I cannot open it alone. It is warded against the likes of me. Please, I am so close to my goal. No, do not open the large door. Help me.
The barred door led to a small library containing bookshelves, a statue that thrummed with magical energy, and a dead zombie that lay inert in the center of the room. There was no sign of Wendell, the sorcerer's friend for whom they were apparently seeking. Heinrich looked puzzled as he reached Valdôtain and promptly ignored his pleas for help. The knight plainly stated that the man they sought was clearly not in the room there, and turned to open the large double doors opposite. Behind, Volkman loudly readied his handgun and bared his teeth at the necromancer. Incandescent rage flashed across Valdôtain's face.
You will help me open this door, or you will regret it, mortals.
Heinrich chuckled and kicked the double doors open. The doors opened up into a large, long room, dominated by a giant skeletal construct in archaic armor that stood within a magical circle. To Heinrich's left, there was a doorway to a cell within which stood the man they sought, Wendell. However, at that very moment, the giant skeleton began to move.
You fool! You have awoken the Guardian! Now I shall never get the pages I seek, and you have opened the doors to nothing but your own death.
Immediately, one of Valdôtain's dogs attacked the giant, but failed to cause any damage. Suddenly from the cell came another voice. "Free me, friend. I can aid you."
No!
Valdôtain cried out.
Do not free him. I will deal with the traitor myself once I have this door open. Now, for the last time, do as I say, or face the consequences.
Heinrich turned briefly to look Valdôtain squarely in the face, winked, and then moved to the cell door. The lock to the cell door required 4 digits to open it. Heinrich's player had the time it took the sand to run out to match each of the dice rolls in turn. He succeeded. And with that, Vendel was free. But would he really aid the heroes? That remained to be seen. Valdôtain sent the second of his hounds against the giant, but it too failed to cause any damage. Frustrated that neither of the heroes would do his bidding, Valdôtain attacked the barred door himself. However, he only managed to knock off one of its 5 damage points. But as he did this, another plan was forming in his head. To the necromancer's left, Voltman raised his gun, aimed it at the towering undead construct, and fired off a shot. This caused 2 damage, knocking it down to 10 wounds. Finally roused from its slumber, the bone giant raised both its ancient bronze swords and brought them crashing down onto the 2 undead hounds, reducing them both to shattered fragments of bone. Heinrich now moved to attack the giant, and his precise blow to its knee joint inflicted a single wound. Vendel pulled open the door to his cell. He glared over at Valdôtain before pulling off a sword from the wall and joining Heinrich in attacking the construct. There was a flurry of sword swings from the dishevelled man before the giant staggered as a further 2 wounds were taken off him. Voltman toyed with the idea of hanging back to reload before dismissing it, raising up his axe and charging into the fray, bringing it down hard into the giant's shin bone, fracturing it and causing 3 wounds. Despite his anger, Valdôtain knew the biggest threat was the Guardian, and once more he cast Flesh Flaying to rot the undead construct away, immediately causing another wound and reducing its strength by 1. In response to these attacks, the giant once more raised its 2 archaic weapons. It brought one crashing down onto the head of Heinrich, killing him outright. Or at least it would have done, had the knight not spent one of his fate points to dodge the blow at the last second. The second weapon slammed into Wendell, likewise causing a mortal blow, which the swordsman too negated via the use of his own singular fate point. Once more, Heinrich struck out at the giant and caused another wound, as did Voltman's axe. And then the withering spell of Valdôtain did its work and caused the entire eldritch construct to collapse into a pile of bones. And so it was now time for Valdôtain to enact his revenge. Vendel, the traitor, would be the first to die. The necromancer would not suffer his minions falling into the hands of his rivals and potentially revealing all of his secrets. Dead men's lips tell no tales. And so Valdôtain pulled out his last sachet of fire dust and hurled it at the swordsman. He cared not if the heroes were caught in the blast. In fact, that was part of his new plan. Kill one, maim the other, and then force them to go into the library, a room that his rival had apparently magically warded to prevent him from entering. He was so close to finally getting the missing pages from the third book of Nagash that were hidden somewhere on the bookshelf yonder. The blast only inflicted a single wound on Heinrich and 2 on Volkmann. However, it removed all 4 of Vendel's wounds, leaving him unconscious on the floor. It was now that Vendel's secret came to light, as his body twisted and writhed, growing misshapen and canine. The swordsman was a werewolf who would attack anyone and anything nearby, be they friend or foe, unless he could pass an intelligence test. No easy task when in his bestial form. Sensing the danger, Volkmann moved up to stand beside the necromancer, hoping to draw the lycanthrope to him. However, the beast, Wendell, failed its intelligence test and lashed out at Heinrich, ripping out his throat. Or at least he would have, had the knight not used another precious fate point. The knight recovered his senses and fled into the cell that Wendell had once occupied. Valdôtain glared angrily at Volkmann and struck him with his staff, inflicting a wound. It was now clear that the necromancer was the true enemy here. The werewolf, Wendell, now bounded towards the two, its jaw dripping with saliva. However, it passed its intelligence test, and, as a modicum of humanity returned to it, it ignored Volkmann and tore at the necromancer, causing a wound. With the odds against him and his prize out of reach, Valdôtain decided to flee and transformed himself into a dark, shadowy mist and vanished from the tower, the bones of his beloved dogs likewise disappearing with him. With the combat phase over, Vendel collapsed and returned to his human form, and he lay still, unconscious on the cold stone floor. Now the necromancer had disappeared, Volkmann decided that there must be riches to be had in the now deserted tower, and began by hacking open the barred door in front of him. Heinrich too started to search his surroundings, finding yet another 150 gold crowns hidden in the cupboard in the Bone Guardian's room. Volkmann searched the bookcase and found a fireball spell scroll. Unknown to him, there were many more powerful items, but they were beyond his comprehension. However, the fates were smiling on the buccaneer. The magical statue in the room pulsed with power, and as he laid his hands upon it, he felt the favour of the gods come upon him, and he gained a bonus permanent fate point. And with that, they awoke Wendell, who quickly went to retrieve the pages that Valdôtain had so desperately sought. This done, the three then dragged all of the gold they had found back out into the streets, to be divided up between them.